Well, BMW South Africa has announced that it has been ruled out of the bidding for the production of a new model that would have created hundreds of new jobs because of the ongoing strike in the automotive sector. Joining us now on the line to explain a little bit more about the damage that has been done by the strike in BMW SA is their spokesperson, Guy Kilfor. Guy, thank you so much for joining us. We understand that the situation is rather serious. Just to give us details as well as numbers. How many jobs would have been created here, and just how big was this deal?
Well, I think it's a difficult question to answer because ultimately what we've announced is that we've been taken out of consideration for the allocation of a new model. It's not guaranteed we would have got it, but certainly it would have been a second model which we would have built alongside the 3 Series at our plant in Roslyn. It would have come on stream in the next few years. I can't tell you more than that because it's a model we haven't yet announced. Certainly we currently run at 24 hours a day and full capacity, so in order to add any volume we would need to add jobs. And certainly to add a new model, it would have been a significant number of jobs if we had in fact got it. But unfortunately, the labour unrest has taken us out of the running.
Guy, just to go back a little, the whole new APDP, and just perhaps you could unpack it for us very briefly. It's very complex, but to be based on a system of rebates that you can claim from exports.
Yes. So the APDP replaces the MIDP. The MIDP, of course, was the old incentive program for the motor industry, a very successful one, which led to companies like BMW and many others moving to an export model for their production in South Africa. The APDP is a replacement for that, and what it tries to do is encourage an increase in local volumes, and it certainly worked. You know, we've gone from 50,000 units a year to 85,000 units a year if we had, in fact, had a full year of production without any labour unrest, and added a third shift in the process. So you could say it's working and working successfully. The other side of the equation, though, is how stable is the labour environment.
So it works successfully if you do get to export. Give us an understanding of how much you're going to lose on the exports, how many exports you will not have as a result?
We've already lost 13,000 units of production. About 80% of that is for export markets. The BMW Group's been able to reallocate about 2,500 units to other markets around the other plants in the network at Regensburg and Munich, which means it's still a net 10,000 unit loss for us. And for the group, some of those are obviously local cars. We could say 8,000 exported cars. That has obviously an immediate effect on our bottom line. But it also has a secondary effect as well, because that's 8,000 export credits we won't get, making the imported cars that we bring in that much more expensive, and a cost which we obviously can't pass on and one we'll have to absorb.
Guy, naturally the labour unrest being the cause of the loss or no longer being in the running to gain this contract, what is BMW doing to solve the situation?
I think it's more than just a problem we can solve on our own. It needs a concerted effort from government, from industry, and from labour collectively. You need an understanding of global competitiveness, and you know every time we have an 11 or 12% wage increase, it further erodes the competitiveness of an industry which is already under pressure. What we don't always remember, we have these support programs, yes, but those support programs are in place to really mitigate against the geographical disadvantages of producing cars in South Africa. We're nowhere near the centre of the world's car markets. We have very in-depth logistics chains. We have very long lead times. Our logistics chains are not really the most competitive or the most efficient. And that all adds cost complexity to an equation which is marginal at the best of times. Factor in major electricity increases, factor in major wage increases, factor in the fact that you can guarantee to lose a fairly sizable chunk of your volume in a 3-year cycle, means that you can't take a responsible management decision by adding more responsibility to a plant which is already slightly volatile.
Guy, stay with us. We've got one of your competitors joining to give us his views. He is the president for manufacturing at Mercedes-Benz, Arno van der Merwe. Arno, you've been on the line while Guy's been giving us his perspective. I really just want to get back to this APDP and the relationship or the partnership that this is supposed to create between the motor industry and the South African government. Surely, if for that partnership to work, you can't have or you can't continue to have these kind of labour unrests.
Yeah, thank you, Alec. I mean, certainly, I think a stable labour environment is an important element, and I think it stands to reason for anybody. However, I think the labour unrest and what we are experiencing at the moment must also be seen in the context of overall industrial relations in the country. And I think there are many different parties that have a role to play in how we stabilise and improve that going forward. I think, just as Guy has been saying, going forward, I think there is an important dialogue that needs to take place between business, government, and labour and trade unions as to how we can reform that to some extent. I don't think anybody can be satisfied and happy with the process that we have gone through and are still going through.
And I take it your production has also been impacted, and you mentioned that there is a lack of joint discussion as well as finding a solution to this problem. What do you think would work best? I take it you do speak to your colleagues in the industry, like the likes of the BMW Group?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly I would like to just comment on what we have experienced over the last years. And I think, as much as we see certainly a very tense and maybe disruptive environment in South Africa, we have to also say that we've experienced incredibly stable labour relations, certainly over the preceding 3 years within the scope of this last NBF agreement. We generally have, on a plant level in our manufacturing group, very solid relationships. We have an agreement in place which I think by many people's standards are benchmark in terms of flexibility that one can achieve with labour together and with trade unions together, even on a global scale. So I think one needs to also see that there is another side of what can be achieved within the South African context. We have, many times commented on important indicators such as attendance. We're running at attendance levels that are normally, within the 99% scope, 1% absence. That is on a global level an absolute benchmark figure. So I think a really constructive dialogue on an ongoing basis, very much close to the interface in the production area, in the different plants, is also absolutely critical in terms of establishing that first part of the relationship. I'm not negating the fact that there is a dialogue required on a high level, none whatsoever, but I think one should not characterize South African labour in the detail based on what we're experiencing on a macro level. There are absolute excellent examples present and possible in this country.
Well, thanks for giving us that little bit of an upbeat view to close off with. You did talk, though, about nobody being happy. So, on the one hand, you're telling us everything's going fine or has been going fine for 3 years, but now the bus has hit the wall. Nobody's happy. How, as to come back to what Gugu said earlier, how do you fix it?
Right. Well, I think firstly we have to be transparent and understand what the status is. So nobody can be happy with, I think we're now in our 7th week of industrial action, in which for the majority of the time there has been not much movement in what the initial settlement offers have been. So just from an efficiency of a process point of view, nobody can be satisfied with that. And I think that needs a sober discussion. It needs a discussion which is maybe a more off the record and outside of the context of a negotiation process, because that does have certain dynamics in which the responsible parties of all entities have the ability to air their views transparently and without the impacts that are within a normal negotiation process. And I think that dialogue needs to be set up and it needs to be organized and it probably needs to be driven strongly from a governmental perspective, seeing as that they also have such a high stake in both environments, labour and business.
Well, that was some strong comment there coming through from the BMW SA spokesperson, Guy Kilfoyle, as well as Arno van der Merwe, Vice President for Manufacturing at Mercedes-Benz South Africa.